Oh, it looks like I'm live. Uh, might have to. I don't know. I'll have to check the YouTube. But anyways. Hello, my name is Rob, and today I will look at some of the environmental news. And I found an article about the Mount Polly disaster. It's been about 10 years since that disaster. Um, why home retrofits will increase. Um, oh, not home retrofits, but building retrofits are important for the achieving climate goals, and those are two of the articles. I have another one, and let's get started. Oh, 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 I meant to news item, news item, and then. So the first article is the Mount Polly disaster. And it's called The Mount Polly Disaster was the result of putting resource extraction above all else. Here's how he changed that. So it's an opinion article in the Norway newspaper. It's by Bev Salos, Neil Nunn, and Sonia Folstenu. Um, so this Sunday is what is Sunday? The 4th of August is 10 years since a mine disaster happened in British Columbia. There was heavy metal. Um, there was a contaminant dam failed. There was heavy metal, mercury, 2.14 tons of mercury, and 134 tons of other heavy metals. And they said that 92% of all lead and mercury in Canadian waterways were released. Um, we know how toxic mercury is from other environmental disasters, um, and the bioaccumulation impacts on First Nations, um, people that rely on fish. I'm trying to think of the disaster in Ontario. It'll come to me after. Um, but we do know that those health impacts. So it's not surprising that those studies that prove that um, it entered the food chain. Uh, this entered a lake, Quensell Lake. Um, and it opened, fully resumed operations even after the disaster, uh, directly into Quensell Lake. This article points that employees raised concerns about questionable management of the tailings facility months prior. Um, and the original engineers withdrew responsibility, noting the embankments and tailings all getting large. So that was one of the issues that contributed to the disaster. Um, this opinion article says that the provincial and federal governments let deadlines for laying charge without um, taking action to without taking action. So they could have charged individuals, but they didn't. And this was the biggest mining environmental mining disaster in Canada. Only like the engineer um, was sanctioned. Um, yeah, and I should mention that I welcome people chatting. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Twitch, um, if you have thoughts about this environmental news story or others, I welcome that. There was a private prosecution filed by the chief um, of Axel Nation, but they were stayed by the province. So that didn't go forward. Um, the article, British Columbia article raised concerns about the influence of industry undermining the BC government's ability to regulate responsibility. Um, and this this article says that the government system in British Columbia has always prioritized socially and ecologically destructive extraction, and point to an article um, that says that in 1858, thousands of people came to the Nuxkapamux territory um, and engaged in um, ecocide and genocidal mining practices. That report is called the 2014 Mount Poly Mine Disaster, Environmental Injustice, Anti-Relational, and Dreams of Unconstrained Futures. That that it looks like a report that I might read when I have additional time. Yeah, and then it talks about like vaccination rates in the 1860s. Those vaccines in the 1860s. So those a lot of indigenous people died from smallpox, and they could have been vaccinated. So like 50 to 80% of people in the between 1862 and 1863 died. Um, at the same time, this article points out that like HBC had vaccination programs. So the argument of this article is that they're still upholding uh, colonial practices, extraction, the regulatory system, and that people should, and that the government should, what's the word? Yeah, respect indigenous laws uh, prior to the 1850s. So the government is prioritizing destructive extraction in British Columbia, and this can be seen with other cases. The Coastal GasLink pipeline comes to mind. The those are fight over old growth forest, and British Columbia does have um, the has adopted the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous People, but is not actually following that. And each nation is a unique nation. Um, they each have rights, and they should be able to say no to a project, which isn't the case. Um, and um, and I also want to recognize that like some nations do support extraction, but it should be an indigenous. It should be indigenous led on um, on various nations. Um, so they say that there should be low threshold for mandatory environmental assessments. Uh, Projects shouldn't be split up to avoid um, regulation. Um, and and decisions should be made based on science, um, as well as they should use the cautionary principle. Um, they say that a lot of professional organizations have their own scientific, the freedom to create the scientific oversight, which is a well, this is the top own scientific oversight. Um, which is a conflict of interest. There should be increased fines to deter reckless behavior, and there should be addressing industries' access to government. And then those like this article talks about looking at prior to 1858. There was sacramentic laws related to resource management practices and land tenure systems. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Um, and then there's been examples of laws, indigenous laws, being respected while still maintaining the industry. They give an example of this Ajax mine in Loops, and the Woodbridge natural gas project, the Northern Sketmic to Coal mining policy, and they improve environmental oversight and prevent agency capture, which is a huge problem in the industrial field, impacting environment. And then those like New Zealand's Maori beliefs. There's a reference to New Zealand. And I missed this when I was reading. There was a discussion paper from the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs called Centering First Nations Concept of Wellbeing Towards a GDP Alternative Index in British Columbia. So yeah, I believe that there's a framework to um, those possibilities to full collaboration with Indigenous people and free prior and informed consent. I believe that there should be progress towards full partnership. So the next article is related. I guess it's not really an article, but let's see. Where was I? So this is from West Coast Environmental Law. It's 5 years after Mount Poly. BC is still struggling with environmental enforcement. And it's now 10 years since Mount Poly. And I highlighted some things. The deadlines have passed for the BC Environmental Management Act and the Canada's Fishery Act. There's low rates of environmental enforcement. The compliance with the Environmental Management Act is low, and this group says that it's being treated with kid gloves. Environmental action taken under the EMA has dropped dramatically over the past 2 decades. There was non-compliance in 60% of inspections. Majority of those are dealt with through written statements or no direct consequences. And then they say that it's alarming that there's few penalties despite thousands of inspections that found non-compliance. Did I highlight anything else on this? I didn't highlight anything else on this. So yeah, I'll go to the next thing. Oh, I have, it's a, oh, I thought I had a different thing for reports, but maybe it's this. Oh, transition. So this is. So this is the report from the Mount Poly Mine Tailings Storage Facility breach in 2014. And this is from the Ministry of Energy and Mines. So I looked at that. It's the Chief Inspector of Mines, November 30th, 2015. And I'm just going to the section where I highlighted stuff. I just read the executive summary. There's a lot more definitions in it. Okay. So yeah, it took place August 3rd, 2014. It was a copper and gold mine. And then I highlighted There's a timeline. So there was a previously unrecognized clay/silt layer, um, the Upper Glacial Questing Unit. That was found. UGLU is the short form. Um, so that played a role in the failure. The clay had high moisture content. Um, the dam failed by sliding on the UGLU. There was the weight. It was 40 meters high tailings dam. There was vertical stress of 800 kilopascals. Um, and the pressure was above the. There was high pressure. And then they talk about the causes of the event. So there was structural failure of an embankment, insufficient beaches and surplus water. Um, there was open excavation. There was insufficient beaches to protect the embankment from the surplus of water once embankment failed. An overconfidence in professional judgment. So yeah, there was a lot of reasons that it that this failed. Um, yeah, so I will go to news item. The next news item, which is just have to switch. So this is the next news item. It's from the National Observer. It's called "Why Cleaning Up Canada's Building Industry Could Be a Big Win for the Economy and Climate" by Darius Snikus. Um, the article says that Canada's has buildings are the third heaviest polluting industry after oil and gas and transportation. in terms of climate change. This can be conformed in national pollutant inventories that are released every couple of years. Um, there's a quote: "The industry has been slow to change." Green buildings advocate Thomas Mueller said, and then policy and investment decisions taken now will impact new builds and retrofits that will decide Canada's carbon footprints for decades to come. And that's from the CEO of the Green Building Council. And that makes sense. Building Once a building is built, the carbon emissions are locked in for a long period of time. So it's a lot easier to retrofit, and it's better to retrofit an old building than to build a new building, and it's better to invest up front for a new building than to retrofit later on when it's more expensive. And this article makes that point. So those two points that they make: building fast with high carbon materials and heavy emitting construction methods will drive greenhouse gas levels higher as Canada's Paris Agreement climate commitments draw closer. And then they also make the point: retrofitting millions of homes, office towers, and public buildings by installing energy efficient boosting, high spec glass and ventilation, etc., will cost tens of billions of dollars a year. To that point, I will say that it costs money for climate inaction as well. So that we do have to factor in both of those. So right now, 1%, although is being retrofitted, and then it will take 71 years to retrofit all commercial buildings and 142 for low-rise homes at current rates. So we're not even near what it takes to get to net zero. It will take 4 to 5% needed to decarbonize most residential and commercial buildings by 2040. So that's 4 to 5, at least 4 to 5 times more than what we're doing now. And this will create a lot of jobs. And then they say that it's a market making opportunity. So a point about the $1 billion to retrofit, retrofitting would add $150 billion into Canada's economy by 2030 and create 1.5 million jobs. And this is according to the CAGBC. I forget what the acronym stood for. And then people should focus. And then there's an argument that large buildings should be the priority. And then Canada's Infrastructure Bank offers $2 billion for low-cost finance But larger scale subsidies or stricter building codes and regulations would have more of an impact. And that's from the Royal Bank of Canada said. Direct financial support for the industry's transition was viewed as unpalatable and distasteful, despite the sector's central role in the housing affordability and climate crisis playing out today. And I will add that saving energy is part of the housing affordability crisis, and retrofits help people save energy. There was an example of the Scotiabank. There's an we can pay now or pay later. And then yeah, that's the article. And then I will go to switch to the next item. Alright. And is anyone listening in? I don't see anyone in the chat. So if you're in the chat, um, please feel free to join in. I would like to hear your perspectives, additional stories that you would like to talk about, not necessarily environmental. Um, but if not, I will go to the next article. But how long? I'll see how long I've been on. Oh, for some reason. Yeah, okay, so I do see the chat. My OBS is saying that I haven't streamed. It's weird. Oh, the chat doesn't seem to be working on YouTube, but it does on Twitch. It's just I just noticed that. Okay. So there was an article in CBC. How did the Jasper wildfire get so out of control? There was extreme heat, not enough rain, and abundance of fuel. It's not simple. And this is a CBC by Stephanie Cram, August 2nd. So there was extreme heat, and it reached 38 degrees before an evacuation on Sunday, July 24th. There was less than 1 millimeter in the first 3 weeks of July. Normal precipitation from 1991 to 2020 was 52 millimeters. And this year they got less than 1 millimeter during the same time period. So Canada is getting drier than historical norms. There's the fire became so big that it created its own weather. There was 100-meter high wall of flames, burning pine cone projectiles. Before 2023, uh, someone is saying that the global record for pyro storms was 102, 50 in Canada. In 2023, it became 140, so beating the record. Um, so there was a pine beetle infestation that killed a lot of trees, and they became dry timber. The beetles were surviving in the winter. The national park is having prescribed burns and removing dry vegetations. And then there's a point forced to burn. I'll add that colonialism has played a role. Removal of a lot of indigenous nations. Um, Modern construction is flammable. Um, and then we should have um, individuals, communities have to have remove dry vegetation and have less flammable building materials, according to this article. And I'll see how much I've been in this for. Let me see. Transition. Oh, I don't want to see how long I've. Oh, there it is. Okay. 42 minutes. So I've been streaming for 42 minutes. Um, yeah, I guess that's a good time to end for today. And I know that Monday, this is a long weekend. I hope to make um, a videos over the long weekend. But I will go to transition. Well, anyways, I thank you for listening, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. I hope to um, read an article about transphobia and for social bread, all about bail and um, um, yeah, I'll look for different articles, and I will make a video about the environmental registry as either on Monday or Tuesday. Um, Perhaps oil. Um, before I head out, I should see if there is any breaking news in Ontario. Okay, so I don't see anything that stands out of politics. There's news about a treaty. I might talk about that. Um, Anyways, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for listening.